Good morning. This is April the 26th, Friday 2024, and we are in BBIS second semester compulsory English class where I have been reading the story Steve Jobs line by line since yesterday. I read almost half. Today I'll read a rest. I may pass comments while reading or I may not. As I read, you follow. If I have highlighted certain part of the text, you can choose to highlight in your notebook. Let's read. So we were reading here yesterday where we read that Jobs did in fact find a teacher right in his own neighborhood, Shunryu Suzuki. So in your note copy, note down that he was a Zen teacher. Shunryu Suzuki, who wrote Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. You can choose to get this book and read it. Ran the San Francisco Zen Center. Note it down. San Francisco Zen Center. Because when you read line by line, the plus point is that in exam, when you get multiple choice questions, MCQs, you will be able to answer them correctly if you read in detail line by line. You are supposed to read every text line by line. Used to come to Los Altos place every Wednesday. In MCQ, how do we set questions like, I'll take this point and I'll say, on what days did Shunryu Suzuki come to the San Francisco Zen Center? A, B, C, D. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now, if you don't read detail, you won't be able to answer. Evening to lecture and meditate with a small group of followers. After a while, he asked his assistant, Kobun Chino. So, keep in mind, note down in your diary or note copy. So, this name, Kobun Chino Otogawa, was Steve Jobs' assistant to open a full-time center there. Jobs, or was it Jobs' assistant or Shunryu Suzuki's assistant? I'm not sure. Jobs became a faithful follower of Suzuki, along with his occasional girlfriend, Krishan Brennan. Note this name. It is not mentioned much in this chapter. Steve Jobs had a girlfriend too, and her name was Krishan Brennan. Note it down. And Daniel Kotke and Elizabeth Holmes. So these were the people who used to visit the Zen Center. He also began to go by himself on retreats to the Sajara Zen Center, a monastery near Carmel where Kobun also taught. So now we know that Kobun was Suzuki's assistant and Kobun Chino Otogawa was also a Zen teacher. Kobun Chino Otogawa was Zen teacher. Kotke found Kobun interesting. His English was good, he recalled. He would speak in a kind of haiku. Haiku is a Japanese poetic form. I don't know much about it. Your principal here, Mr. Mitrabandhu Paudel, he is a very well-known haiku writer. He has also published books on haiku. You can borrow and read, or you can simply Google. One haiku I remember is in Nepali, खेतहरू दौडिरहेछन् हरियाली ओढेर. If I write, खेतहरू I may have forgotten something. दौडिरहेछन् हरियाली ओढेर. I guess it's Abhi Subedi's haiku, but I'm I might have forgotten. It's very meaningful, it's short. Haikus are minimal, they use less words, but they have very good quality. Look, it's sound Bhadra, and there is green paddy, and the wind is blowing. So when the wind blows in the green paddy field, the paddy plants, they look like these waves, green waves. So the khetaru, the fields are seen as people, as if they are running, covering Haryali. Haryali. Look, it is only 7 words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Within 7 words, the writer is able to create a very good imagery and convey a message. Right? The feature of haiku is that it uses minimum words. Right? Okay. So this guy spoke like haiku with poetic suggestive phrases. We would sit and listen to him, and half the time we had no idea what he was going on about. What he was going on about. I took the whole thing as a kind of light-hearted break. Holmes was more into the scene. We would go to Kobun's meditations, sit on Jaffu cushions, and he would sit on a dais, she said. We learned how to tune our distraction. This is important because in this story you read a lot about meditations. So what is meditation? Meditations help you remove distractions and achieve peace of mind. It was magical thing, meditation. One evening we were meditating with Kobun when it was raining, and he taught us how to use ambient sounds to bring us back to focus on our meditation. In many Buddhist practices, if you see in monasteries also, they use a sound to meditate, like they are singing, bowls are there, other music instruments, they play some sound to help them concentrate. As for Jobs, his devotion was intense. You see the characteristics of Steve Jobs. He was very devoted to things. He became really serious and self-important and just generally unbearable. According to Kotke, he began meeting with Kobun almost daily. Steve Jobs began to meet with Kobun almost daily. And every few months they went on retreat. What is a retreat? Retreat is like sometimes where you're tired of city life, you go to some picnic spot or some medicine center. That's retreat, moving away from the hustle and bustle of city and finding peace. Together to meditate. I ended up spending as much time as I could with him, Jobs recalled. He had a wife who was a nurse at Stanford and 2 kids. She worked the night shift, so I would go over and hang out with him in the evenings. She would get home about midnight and shoo me away. So because Jobs was with her husband till midnight, she will say, okay, now you move, go. We need to stay. Let us stay in peace. For example, they sometimes discussed whether Jobs should devote himself fully to his spiritual pursuits, but Coburn counseled otherwise. He assured Jobs that he could keep in touch with his spiritual side while working in a business. This is very good idea. You don't have to quit your home and your family and job to search spirituality. You can search spiritual things in a normal day-to-day life. You can continue with the business and still meditate. You can continue the business and still be a religious person. You don't have to quit whole thing. The relationship turned out to be lasting and deep between Coburn and Steve Jobs. 17 years later, Coburn would perform Jobs' wedding ceremony. So, Job had girlfriend, you read earlier. Now, after 17 years, they got married and Coburn came in their marriage. Job's compulsive search for self-awareness. Important point to note down. He was always searching for the self. You know, what is philosophy? Philosophy, one quality of a philosopher is self-awareness. Philosophers are aware about themselves, their self. also led him to undergo primal scream therapy. Note it down, important point here. Primal scream therapy. What is that? Which had recently been developed and popularized by a Los Angeles psychotherapist named Arthur Jano. You may have multiple choice question here, right? Who propounded this idea of scream therapy? Note this name. Arthur Jano popularized primal scream therapy. What is that? It was based on the Sigmund Freud. Freudian theory that psychological problems are caused by the repressed pains of childhood. Actually, psychology says that our mind is like an iceberg. Our mind is like an iceberg in which the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, there are more subconscious things. And what happens? You have a desire, and your desire is not fulfilled. You can't achieve the desire. You feel painful. So that painful desire goes into your memory, stays here. And whenever this memory of the bad thing surfaces up, you feel bad. So what they did, read here, Janov argued that they could be resolved. They means such repressed desires, problems, traumas could be resolved by re-suffering these primal moments. Re-suffering means reacting, reenacting. You act as if you have the problem while fully expressing the pain, sometimes in scream. So what the idea was that, suppose you were beaten as a child and you have this traumatic feeling that somebody punished you for nothing and you feel bad. Now you remember that beating and you cry, you weep loudly. And what is the idea? As you cry and weep, then your emotion, your feeling is released and you feel light-hearted. That's the point. That's primal scream therapy. You may have a short answer question in the examination. Short answer question. What do you understand by primal scream therapy? Explain. Okay. So, because it involved to Jobs, this seemed preferable. What was Job's problem? Job's problem was that Job lost his real mother and father. He was raised by foster parents. So he had this problem. He was always willing to know who is my father, who is my mother. To Jobs, this seemed preferable to talk therapy. There is another talk therapy. What is talk therapy? In talk therapy, in psychotherapy, you go to clinic, here is a table, and you are the patient. You are the patient, and you have the doctor there. And this doctor is called analyst and patient. And what is psychotherapy? There is no medicine, not much medicine. Actually, you sit and the doctor will talk to you. He'll ask questions and you talk. And the doctor might talk you 5 hours, 6 hours, 3 hours for 10 days, 15 days, 1 month. And as you talk, then without you realizing, you reveal your inner mind and the doctor can find out what is wrong with you. So this is called talk therapy. In psychotherapy, therapy is done by talking. That's why there is a Nepali song, Manko kura bandina rakha, gato parijala, chatta phukaideu. Very old Nepali song. If you go to YouTube, you can watch it. Manko kura bandina rakha, gato parijala, chatta phukaideu. And how do you do phukaunu? By talking. That's why when you girls and boys, you have these young age people, you have some problem, you find your friend. And you go to a cafe under the tree and you talk to them. And when you finish talking, you say, now I feel light-hearted. So those who talk a lot, they are normal people. Those who talk a little, they are dangerous people. Because you don't know what's going on in their heart. So be very careful with those who talk less and less, right? According to psychology at least. Because you have a lot of repressed ideas. You are not able to express them. Okay, I may be wrong, you may just reject my idea. Okay. Because it involved intuitive, now this is very important, note down. intuitive feeling. Steve Jobs compares intuition with intellect. And at one point, Jobs says that the Indian culture, the Oriental culture is based on intuition, and the Western culture is based on intellect. What is intellect? Intellect is based on reasoning. And intellect and reasoning, that is acquired, that is learned, that you get from training. Now, intuition is by birth and experience. And Steve Jobs liked intuition. That's why he liked India, because it involved intuitive feeling and emotional action rather than just rational analyzing. So Steve Jobs preferred intuitive feeling in comparison to rational analyzing. This was not something to think about. He later said, this was something to do. To close your eyes, hold your breath, jump in, and come out the other end more insightful. A group of Janob's adherents, followers, ran a program called the Oregon Healing Center. We read about Oregon in the previous story also, remember, Dawn. Because in the story Dawn, the narrator says he is from Oregon City, right? Note it down, the name, Oregon Healing Center. In an old hotel in Eugene, note the places also, because most MCQs you get from such details. That was managed by Jobs' Reed College guru, Robert Freeland. Note it down. Who was Robert Freeland? Steve Jobs' college guru. Whose all one farm commune. Note it down. You get multiple choice questions from such details. Was nearby. In late 1974, Jobs signed up for a 12-week course of primal therapy. There costing $1,000. Steve and I were both into personal growth. So I wanted to go with him, Kotke recounted, but I could not afford because it cost $1,000. Jobs confided to close friends that he was driven by the pain he was feeling about being put up for adoption and not knowing about his birth parents. Very important point. You should keep in mind. Look here, what he said to his friend. Confided means he told his friend secretly. What? He was driven by the pain he was feeling about being put up for adoption and not knowing about his birth parents. 2 days before, my father told a story about my birth. I was born as a premature baby at 7.5 months. Why? Because when I was in my mother's womb, my mother's body got swollen. And my daddy took my mom to hospital. And the lady doctor prescribed a medicine. Daddy bought medicine. But my mom was so careless, she didn't take the medicine. And because she didn't take the medicine, then she had health problem. And she was taken to hospital. And I was born before time, 7.5 months. And because of my mother's sickness, when I was born, I was almost dead. Almost dead. And my body, my daddy says, was very shrunken. I was not even half kilogram. And then the nurse who was helping my mom deliver me was very cruel and rude. And when my mother said, "Where is my baby?" the nurse said, "Mara hua bacha paida karti aur puchti hai." My father says. And then the doctor came because I didn't cry. They thought I'm a dead baby. Then the doctor took me from the legs and hung me and shook me. I wouldn't cry. Then he brought a syringe and pinched in my soul. Then I cried. That's my story. You have heard about Steve Jobs' story, right? I just recalled my story. So, Steve had a very profound desire to know his physical parents so he could better know himself. So when you don't know who was your father, mother, you don't know yourself. Because you don't know your genealogy. You don't know your lineage. Lineage. You don't know your bamsha. And you have this difficulty, who I am. Friedland later said he had learned from Paul and Clara Jobs that his birth parents, now who are Paul and Clara Jobs? The people who adopted Steve. They were not his biological parents. They were his foster parents. That his birth parents had both been graduate students at a university, that his father might be Syrian. So there were two, a boy and girl at the university student. They were in love. They had sex. The girl was pregnant. She gave birth. They didn't want to keep the baby. So they left him. And they adopted. He had even thought about, so we can guess that Steve Jobs was born out of marriage. He was born out of marriage. He had even thought about hiring a private investigator, but he decided not to do so for the time being. I did not want to hurt my parents by finding them out. Maybe my parents did not want to tell about me because they were not married. Something disgraceful, right? Yes. Something disgraceful. He recalled referring to Paul and Clara. He was struggling with the fact that he had been adopted. He didn't feel comfortable. According to Elizabeth Holmes, he felt that it was an issue that he needed to get hold of emotionally. That's why he had problem. He was feeling very bad with the fact that his parents didn't raise him. They gave him up. Jobs admitted as much to her. This is something that is bothering me, and I need to focus on it. What? The fact that my parents did not keep me. The fact that I don't know who they were. He said he was even more open with Greg Calhoun. He was doing a lot of soul searching. Searching your soul. This is why we read earlier that he had philosophical outlook about being adopted, and he talked about it with me a lot. Colin recalled the primal scream and the muscle and the mucusless diet. He was trying to cleanse himself and get deeper into his frustration about his birth. Frustration about his birth. He told me he was deeply angry about the fact that he had been given up. How would you feel if now at this age, something I'll say difficult. How would you feel now if somebody tells your parents call you this evening and say, sorry, अब भन्नै पर्यो तिमी ब्याचलर पुगिसक्यौ तिमी हाम्रो छोरी होइन बा. How would you feel? You will go mad. You can't imagine. You can't imagine. Can you imagine? Your parents call you this evening and say कि तिमी हाम्रो बच्चा होइन, तिमीलाई हामीले बाटोमा भेटाएको. You will go mad. You can't bear it. You can't bear it. See the difficulty. Okay. John Lennon. John Lennon had undergone the same primal scream therapy in 1970. And you know John Lennon is one of the Beatles singer. December of that year, he released the song Mother with the Plastic Ono Band. It dealt with Lennon's own feelings about a father who had abandoned him and a mother who had been killed when he was a teenager. John Lennon's father had abandoned the baby and his mother had been killed when he was young, teenager. The refrain includes the haunting chant, Mama, don't go, Daddy, come home, in the song. You can listen to this song this evening. यहाँ बज्छ यसमा? आऊ ल बजाऊ. कसलाई आउँछ बजाऊ? कसलाई आउँछ भने प्ले गर न. जन लेनन मामा भनेर प्ले गर न, आइहाल्छ। ट्राई गर त, सुनौ न के सङ रहेछ, यति फेमस सङ।